Recording.
Okay, there we go. That was
Baruch
it.
Hashem.
Well done. Something from the iPad. Okay, so it seems to be working here. Let's just give another minute and then we'll begin. Hi, Ruth Carnison.
Hello. Hello, Rabbi.
Nice to see you. And we got Cecile. I can't see you, Cecile, but I know you're there. Barbara, I know you're there. Alison, always good to see you. Alfonso, how's it?
I'm here.
So great.
Shalom, Rabbi.
I didn't think there was going to be that many people who come today, even though I think it's quite an interesting thing that we're going to be doing. But, learning about Tisha B'Av is not everybody's cup of tea, so to speak. People want to talk about the happy things in life, not the sad things in general. And I don't blame them. This today will be something, different. I definitely don't think anyone in this country's ever seen what I'm about to show people. And I'm thinking around the world, it was very uncommon. So I think we'll begin. What's the time? It's 4:01. Okay, so let me start off with a introduction. I lived in San Diego for close to 10 years. And one day I'm visiting a friend of mine who lives in La Jolla, which is a certain area that a lot of Jewish people, used to live in, still do if they have that amount of money. It's a very expensive neighborhood to live in today. And I left this friend of mine's house pretty late. I think it must have been 9 p.m. Not crazy late, but somewhat late. I lived maybe 15 minutes drive away. And I had driven past the University of California, San Diego, maybe 50 to 100 times before. And I'd never seen it, and I'd always heard that it is an amazing campus. So I said to myself, you know what? I'm driving past the university. Why don't I drive past for a quick visit and check it out, even though it was pretty late? Maybe it was a little bit earlier, maybe 8 p.m. Why not and just check out the university? So it's not like over here that, or at least it wasn't then, that there's big security and you have to show your ID and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, there's a hospital on campus. So it's open to everybody. People can drive into the university campus and walk around and go to the hospital or whatever they need to do. So I parked my car, and it's a big campus, massive campus, thousands of cars spread out all over. And I made the rookie mistake of not remembering numbers, particular buildings nearby. And it took me 2 hours to find my car. So after I walked around for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I roamed the campus for 2 hours, so much so that the campus police saw me walking around after an hour and a half in their little golf carts, came up to me and said, excuse me, can we help you, sir? Yeah, thank you so much. I'd love you. I can't find my car. So they tried to help me. They drove me around. Eventually, after 2 hours, I found my car, and I never went back again. But while I was going there for those 2 hours of walking, I saw the most amazing thing that I would have never expected to see at an American campus. I would have never expected to see it at any university campus. And it was not only was it playing at 10 p.m. at night in the cafeteria on a big screen TV. It was a projection onto a screen. So we're talking, 5 meters by 8 meters, an enormous, enormous area to watch a video, kind of like going to a movie at the bioscope, at the cinema, as they say. What was it? It was a debate from the debating club at University of California, San Diego, about a passage from the Talmud describing the destruction of the Jewish temple. I could not believe my eyes. And I'm going to be sharing a little bit of what I saw with you today, because it's on YouTube. And you'll see for yourselves how dynamic the American society makes Judaism. Now, I'm not trying to say this is right or wrong, because it's definitely going to rub some people up the wrong way, the way that they present this. Some people will absolutely love it. You can choose whichever you want. But I thought that I would share that experience with you. And I only found it this week that it was actually online. And you're going to see it's the most, I don't even have words to describe what it is. Before I do that, I'm going to read the story that they're going to be debating over. And it's not, the story will be told by them as well in the way that they tell it, and you'll see exactly what I mean. But I'm going to tell the story first, because the way that they do it with music and with other things, it's hard to hear all the words. So that's why I'm going to share my screen so we can actually read the passage from the Talmud about how Jerusalem got destroyed. Now, is this a fictitious story or a real story? Hard to know. I know that when you talk about names like Kamsa and Bar Kamsa being the two nemesis in the story, that probably tells you that those are not real names. It's kind of like saying, Jack and John, or Jack and, Double Jack, something like that. Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. So their names are not real, but maybe the story is real, or maybe the story is not real and it's just to prove a point. We'll never ever know. But this is from the Talmud, from the chapter of, it's from the tractate of Nezikin. Sorry, let me say that again. It's from the tractate of Gittin, which is about the laws of divorce. And it's quite appropriate, I think the video says it, that it's from the laws of divorce, because it describes how the Jewish people got a divorce from God, so to speak, when the temple was destroyed. And maybe that's why it was fitted into this section. So before we show the video, I'm going to share my screen. I hope this all works, just because I am using my computer, which I normally don't use. I use an iPad. But let me see if I can bring this up. Can you see my screen, everyone? Okay. So I'm just going to read it in my voice. Just forgive me. You might go quicker with your own eyes, but I'm just going to read it so that everyone can actually say that they've read a passage of the Talmud, as well as to get the story clear. Rabbi Yochanan said, "What is it written? Blessed is the man who is always afraid, but the one who hardens his heart falls into misfortune." Proverbs 28:14. And it's trying to describe what that verse is by a whole long story. And I don't think the story, I think the story continues to get back to Rabbi Yochanan, but this is the part that we need. Jerusalem was destroyed over Kamsa, who was a person, and Bar Kamsa, who was another person. Tur Malka, another city in Israel, was destroyed over a rooster and a hen. So there's a story about a rooster and a hen we're not going to have time for today. Beitar was destroyed over the shaft of a litter. Again, we're not going to have time for that story. Let's go into the story about Jerusalem. Jerusalem was destroyed over Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. A man who was friends with Kamsa, but who hated Bar Kamsa, held a feast. He said to his servant, "Go and bring me Kamsa." The servant went and brought him the wrong person, whose name was Bar Kamsa. The host went and found him, meaning the guest who was uninvited to the party, sitting at the party. He said, "Since you are my enemy, why did you come here? Get up and go."
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but Marilyn Eid is asking you to let her in.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so that's hard. Thank you for letting me know. I've got to go back into Zoom to do that. And how do I do that? View, admit all. Okay, that should work. Thank you for letting me know, Addison. Okay, just getting used to the technology. Okay, so where is it? Okay, here we are. Whoever's just arrived, we're reading a story which we'll watch a video about afterwards. And I'm going to try to highlight it. No, I can't highlight it in this section. So just read for yourselves. I'm right in the beginning talking about why Jerusalem was destroyed. And somebody invited, instead of inviting his friend to his party, he invited his nemesis. And he said, get out and leave my party. Bar Kamsa, the enemy, who was uninvited, but now found himself at a party, said to the host, since I have come, leave me alone, and I will give you money for what I eat and drink. Fair enough. The host said to this guest, this uninvited guest, no, get out. Still, the uninvited guest said back to the host, I will give you the money for half of the feast. Still, the host said, no. The uninvited guest said back to the host, I will give you the money for the entire party. I'll pay for all the decorations, all the food, the alcohol tab, whatever it is. He said to him, no. The host seized him and forced him to get up and go. He literally kicked him out the party with the bouncers. So now the uninvited guest is very upset. He says back to the rabbis, he says, since the rabbis were at my party and they were sitting there and they did not protest, I will go and inform against them at the king's palace, meaning at the Caesar, because Rome was ruling over Israel at the time. He said to Caesar, the Jews are rebelling against you. So he was causing trouble. He was so upset that the rabbis didn't protect him at the party that he now was pretty much titty-telling on them to the Caesar. The Jews are rebelling against you, he said to him. Says who? The Caesar replied. Bar Kamsa said back to the Caesar, if you want proof, send them an offering and see if they will sacrifice it for you, which was a common practice that the Jews who were under the Roman rule were offering tribute on behalf of the Romans to Hashem in the temple. So the Caesar said, okay, good idea. If they are really rebelling, let me see if they're rebelling. So I'll send with you, Bar Kamsa, an offering and let me know if they will offer it. So he sent an offering and he wanted to see if they would sacrifice it for him. He sent him a 3-year-old calf. As Bar Kamsa was traveling, he caused a blemish on the upper lip, and some say a cataract in its eye, which for the Jews is a blemish, meaning it cannot be offered on the Jewish temple, but for them, for the Caesar, it is not a blemish to be offered as a sacrifice in the Roman temples. The rabbis reasoned that they should sacrifice it for the sake of peace with the kingdom of the Romans. So the rabbis at first assumed, okay, it's not really an animal that's fit to be offered to God according to the laws of the Torah, but it's coming from the Caesar to determine if we are rebelling. If we do not do this, we're going to be in big trouble, so maybe we should do it. That's what the rabbis were saying. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulus said to the rest of the rabbis, no, we cannot offer this offering because people will say that blemished animals may be offered on the altar. So they'll learn the wrong Torah law if we do that. We will be the example for people breaking the Torah. Then the rabbi said, okay, so we can't break the Torah in terms of offering sacrifices to God that are not good. So then the only other alternative is maybe to kill Bar Kamsa before he reaches the temple. Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulus said to the rest of the rabbis, no, we cannot kill this man who's trying to cause trouble for the rest of the Jews, because people will learn the wrong law that if you offer a blemished animal, you deserve death, which is not the case. The conclusion of the Talmud is Rabbi Yochanan says, the humbleness or the humility or the scrupulousness or the meekness, they say in this text, but it's a very hard word to understand in the Talmud. The meekness of Rabbi Zachariah ben Avkulus destroyed our temple, set fire to our sanctuary, and exiled us from our land. Okay, so that is the story that we're going to be analyzing today. Welcome for all those who are a little bit late. I'm just going to catch everyone up in 1 minute and then we're going to continue. When I was in San Diego, I saw the craziest events that I've ever seen on a university campus. And I'm about to show that to you because it's on YouTube. It's from the debating club and from the music academy at the University of California, San Diego. And Jews and non-Jewish people in the debating club in America, in college, maybe even the legal faculty, debating a section from the Talmud, which was so professionally done that it was being displayed for all the university students to see in the cafeteria, and that's why I saw it. There's a little bit of an introduction. It's a video. It's the first time I'm sharing a video on Zoom. So I hope the technology works. I can always send the link later if it doesn't. We're going to try and watch the first maybe 15 or 20 minutes. And you're going to see lots of people speak. You're going to see musicians. You're going to see professors of many, many different disciplines. You're also going to see, and also people debating, like students, real students debating the Kamsa and Bar Kamsa story. So just so that you don't get confused, you have a host who invites an unexpected guest who's called Bar Kamsa. Bar Kamsa gets kicked out of the party. He gets so embarrassed and he says, because all the rabbis were at the party and they did nothing, I hate all of them, and if I'm going down, I'm bringing all the rest of them down with me. And he gets the Caesar involved, and he tells that the Jews are rebelling, and the Caesar eventually attacks Rome based on this story. Okay, so that's the background of the story. Now let's see the video. We'll try to watch it for maybe like 15 minutes or so, and then I'll wrap it up with some comments of myself. Okay, so let's see if I can do this. Share screen. I'm going to go to advanced, share, optimize, and if anyone can't hear, please just let me know. Here is the story. I'm going to make it big on YouTube, and voila, let's hope this works.
Tradition elsewhere. The story comes from a Talmudic volume on divorce. And indeed, this was a divorce between Jews and Romans, or was it Jews not getting along among themselves? Was it Jews as a nation divorcing from their political powers, or from their God breaking the ages-old covenant? What is interesting about the Talmud is that this is an oral tradition that is meant not only to be retold, but also studied, commented, and debated. The main events are here. The commentaries are here. Does it remind you of something? Some people like to draw the parallel between the page layout and hypertext. But all of this is not just additional information, footnotes, or links. These are differences in opinions, and the text, more than it is trying to prove a point, it raises questions and opens controversies. In the show program that you're about to see, we try to rework this idea of a story to be told and debated into a modern performance using multiple media, the internet, and some specially developed technology to encourage public participation. Using their laptops, during the show, people can chat, browse, and share information as the story goes on. This is not going to be a Hollywood epic or a height-breaking rendering of the destruction drama. It also is not the adversarial debate where one side is proven right or wrong. So what is it all about? There was an important banquet held in ancient Jerusalem, attended by rabbis and other dignitaries, to which a man called Kamsa never showed up. It was the servant's fault for bringing the wrong man, Bar Kamsa. We don't know much about him, except that he probably was not liked by the community, so when Bar Kamsa gets kicked out, the rabbis do not intervene. Welcome to Kamsa and Bar Kamsa.
certain man had a friend, Kamsa, and an enemy, Bar Kamsa. He once prepared a party and said to his servant,
"Go and bring Kamsa."
The man went and brought Bar Kamsa.
Seen you tell tales about me. What are you doing here? Get out.
Since I am here, let me stay, and I will pay you for whatever I eat and drink.
I won't.
Then let me give you half the cost of the party.
No.
Then let me pay for the whole party.
No.
Since the rabbis were sitting there and did not stop him, this shows that they agree with him. I will go and inform against them to the government. He went and said to the emperor, "The Jews are rebelling against you."
How can I tell?
Send them an offering and see whether they will offer it on the altar.
So he sent with him a fine calf.
While on the way, he made a blemish on its upper lip, or as some say, on the white of its eye, in a place where Jews count it a blemish, but they do not. The rabbis were inclined to offer it in order not to offend the government. Said Rabbi Zechariah ben Abkulas to them,
People will say that blemished animals are offered on the altar.
They then proposed to kill Bar Kamsa so that he should not go and inform against them.
Is one who makes a blemish on consecrated animals to be put to death?
Rabbi Yohanan thereupon remarked, "Through the scrupulousness of Rabbi Zechariah ben Abkulas, our house has been destroyed, our temple burnt, and we ourselves exiled from our land."
The take-home message of the Kamsa and Bar Kamsa story was that the temple was destroyed because of gratuitous violence. Sinat Chinam. Now, that's it. When you think about it, it's It's an incredibly strong statement on an ethical level.
Hatred does create social structure, or certain social structure does promote groundless hatred.
And that humiliation was so wrong that it was a bad way to insist on justice, on the host's justice. But there was a way to insist on justice by accepting payment, but humiliating him in public was too much. It's so bad that people who do this, at least they do to the sages, get this terrible punishment in the afterlife.
That's what happens with rage. Rage flies out of control. And that's what happens with humiliation and embarrassment. It is important to understand that one of the contexts of the story is what a powerful force humiliation and embarrassment is.
The Jews have all along tried to, in effect, blame themselves for everything, which is a nice moral stance. It allows you to look at what your role in everything is. And after all, what is more important than your own role, whether as an individual or as a people?
They're looking at this one story and saying this one story is a microcosm of just Jews unable to get along. Unable to get along meant ultimately political disaster because they couldn't unify. And I think that's the specific sinat chinam they're talking about.
And the Romans in the later stories were vicious imperialistic regimes. Whether we could have done anything that would have allowed us to survive as a country as well as a nation is a good question. If we ask it seriously historically, we may not be able to come up with an answer.
If you wanted to make lessons out of Jewish history, this is an unusual lesson to take away. It would be like somebody today saying, September 11th happened because of gratuitous hatred.
In this kind of legalistic position that the rabbi takes, and which saves the life of Bar Kamsa, is not the right kind of deliberative, reflective, calm, rational approach.
Then Abkulas himself, what was his scrupulousness? When the offering, offering for sacrifice is brought, the animal is brought, and it has this blemish, he insists on not taking it to the altar because of this blemish, even though it's a minor blemish, even though it's a blemish that people may not even know about if they're not going to make a fuss about it. But he says, no, we can't do this. And they say, okay, so, let's kill the man. He said, what? Kill the man? You can't kill him, it's unjust, because what did he do? Just put a blemish on the animal property. And he leaves everything open. He doesn't let them do anything in this sort of stalemate.
It is being small-minded in the sense that you are looking at the rules. You are not looking ahead of the larger consequences, but you are taking the rules too literally.
Rav Zechariah is too meek in his application of Torah, and therefore lets Bar Kamsa live when he could have sentenced him to death.
The proper and rational thing would have been to bypass him and to talk to the Romans, okay, and not accept this decision, okay?
So the word there is scrupulousness, but the Hebrew seems to be anava because of the humility. So he doesn't feel arrogant enough to change the law. And then the translator here sort of changes it to scrupulousness, like he's so scrupulous, almost implying like he's a zealot. But in the Hebrew, it's not so much that he's a zealot, that he's humble. I mean, he's going to follow the law because he's not so arrogant that he's going to change the law.
That Bar Kamsa really gets under my skin every time I hear this story. I mean, the guy's just such a jerk to me. I mean, here he is, he's accused of telling tales about the host, and instead of apologizing for it, or at least offering an explanation, he proceeds to change the subject and instead tries to buy his way into the party. Now, first, by not directly addressing the host's accusation, he all but admits his guilt. And second, and even worse, he has the gall to try to solve a deep-rooted problem with a superficial means. And this is the ultimate insult, and it really puts the host in a tough position. On the surface, by kicking Bar Kamsa out of the party, he's the one who looks like a jerk. So, although I understand why the host kicked him out of the party, if it were me, I would have let him stay because I wouldn't let Bar Kamsa get the satisfaction of making me look like a jerk at my own party. However, I definitely wouldn't forgive him without an apology because obviously somebody like Bar Kamsa would take advantage of such unconditional forgiveness. So I don't want to send him the message that he can just walk all over me. And second, and probably more importantly, I definitely would not let him pay for the party because, again, if I let him pay for the party, it lessens the gravity of the situation. It sends him the wrong message that this problem can be solved with money, and I think that's the wrong message you want to send. So, in short, I would let him stay, but I wouldn't let him pay.
The problem with this situation is you simply can't put all the blame on Bar Kamsa. If you look, the host makes claims about him speaking against him in the past, but we don't know what exactly was said. We don't know if perhaps maybe this host might have initiated this confrontation in the first place. Bar Kamsa is obviously not somebody that's well liked or maybe not even well respected by the Jewish community at that time, as evidenced by the fact that the rabbis didn't stand up for him when he was kicked out of the party. In this situation, it's unfortunate that he was mistakenly invited to this party, but once he's already there, is it more noble to be confrontational and to boot him out after he's already offered to pay for his own share of the food, which to me is not trying to slap the host in the face. He's just simply saying, look, this is a situation that neither of us really likes, but I don't want to get kicked out of this party and be humiliated, because if we look within the context of the time, feasts and parties were very important in this social order of things. You knew your place in society based off of where you sat around the feast. And for him to be kicked out in front of all the important people there would be completely humiliating to him. So you can't blame Bar Kamsa for feeling upset at the end of this. It's not good to be vengeful, but at the same time, the host was confrontational when he didn't need to be.
I don't think this is about placing blame or who is right or wrong, but I think it is about a situation that both parties should recognize that this is a chance to move it forward and progress and realize that the past cannot be changed and that it's done, but that the present can persist and people can grow. And in terms of Bar Kamsa offering money to pay his way into the party, we don't know that his intention was bad and was to insult the host, but we can guess that perhaps that's the only way he's ever learned how to negotiate or communicate, and I think that really needs to be considered. And somebody that would spread lies about a person probably lacks confidence and self-worth, and so this is a chance for the host to inspire other people to act in a similar way by allowing him to stay and not forgiving him, but recognizing, to move forward, not condoning his behavior. And instead, he kicks him out and embarrasses him, and I think that humiliation can make people act really irrationally in order to switch the focus from themselves to something else, and that's really where it went wrong, so it could have been diffused right there.
If we look at situations where somebody is socially awkward, somebody doesn't know how to act around people, it's often the case where it's not necessarily that person's fault, but it's also the people's fault who don't take that, lend them a hand and just say, okay, I noticed that you don't know how to act, that you take everything personally, and that's okay because that's not your fault. Maybe you were raised badly, maybe.
See, Steve, I think Bar Kamsa is the one who has to make the first step. I think the host, we don't know, but I'm guessing that he'd be willing to listen to the guy if he at least just gave him some sort of explanation. He doesn't give him definitely doesn't apologize, and he doesn't even give an sorry about talking about you behind your back like that or whatever he did. To me, it just admits his guilt, and it just to say that right away, just to go right into, hey, you know what? Let me pay for everything here. Like it totally cheapens the problem, and it's really the timing of when he did it. It just like to offer money like right there instead of I'm not going to apologize. I'm not even going to explain myself because obviously I'm a jerk and I was talking about you behind your back, and I'm not even going to apologize for that. But you know what? I'm rich, so why don't you let me stay and I'll pay for everything. I just think that's so insulting. I hear what you guys are saying about that he's obviously got problems, and yeah, he does, but it's I just don't think.
So whoever came in halfway doesn't know where you are, what planet we're on. Welcome. That was a video from University of California, San Diego that I stumbled onto in one of my late night antics, getting lost at the University of California. And that was being shown in the cafeteria on a 24-hour system. Once it got to the end of the video, it started again. I watched the whole one and then I noticed that it started again. So they wanted everybody to see that. It's the most unbelievable thing where they try to do like different music things with describing the story from the Talmud of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, and they invited the music students as well as the legal students as well as the debating club to try and get into the position of what happened to this particular party that resulted in Caesar becoming infuriating and ordering his troops to march into Jerusalem. Now, I could ask, if I wanted to make this interactive, and I will ask it if anyone wants to say something, but you don't have to. So they were debating the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, these children or these students. Do any of you have a strong inclination of what should have happened? So again, whoever arrived late, I'm going to give a 1-minute recap of what happened. Person A, a host, invited his friend to a party through a messenger. But the messenger, instead of inviting Mr. A. Cohen, he invited Mr. B. Cohen. Just happens to be the correct person's name was Kamsa, and he invited a man whose name was Bar Kamsa. And Bar Kamsa arrived at the house of this host, and they hated each other. And I can't understand why Bar Kamsa arrived. Maybe he didn't know that the party was of the person of his enemy. Maybe he thought the person was trying to, make friends with him. The story doesn't say. All the story says is this enemy arrived at the host party and the host kicked him out. And no matter what this Bar Kamsa wanted to do, he was a wealthy man. I'll pay for my meal. I'll pay for half the meal. I'll pay for the whole meal. I'll pay for the alcohol tab. I'll pay for everything. Just don't kick me out in front of everyone because I'm going to get embarrassed. And still the host kicked him out and all the rabbis were at the party. And this person who got kicked out was so infuriating, saying, oh, these rabbis, they think they're so religious and they're so special and they didn't do anything and just allowed me to get embarrassed. I'm going to make a big stir now. I don't care. And he went and he told the Caesar that the Jews are rebelling and the Caesar pretty much attacked Jerusalem. What do you think the correct stance should be in this particular situation? Do any of you think that the host should have done anything, that the guests should have done anything, that the rabbis should have done something? Does anyone have a comment about this? You saw what the
Rabbi?
Yeah, Alfonso's got a comment.
Definitely the host is part of the problem because in the video, the students seem to be focusing on Bar Kamsa, but it is the host whose attitude actually creates that whole scenario because he had the choice. He could have changed his attitude. He could have spoken to the man softly. He could have asked him politely to leave. He did not.
So you're saying talk to him privately instead of making a big hoo-ha in front of everyone. Call this person to the door and just say, please remove yourself, quietly.
Or let him stay and then afterwards say, but you were not invited. And the only reason why I didn't kick you out is because I didn't want to embarrass you. But we're still enemies.
Okay,
because
so it's interesting.
Every action
Not
has
the
a
same
reaction.
story, Alfonso, but I was once at a house in Jerusalem where a rabbi was the host and two drunken beggars came on Friday night to the dinner. And he also, of course, he didn't want them at the dinner. The guests were causing problems with all the other guests, these drunken people. But he didn't say anything. So this is like a real scenario that I've seen with my own eyes, except it wasn't an enemy, it was drunken people. Thank you, Alfonso. Anyone else want to comment on Alfonso saying the host should bear at least half the blame, if not more? Anyone else want to say anything about that? Ruth?
Yes,
yeah.
I agree with Alfonso. I think the host started the problem because he broke for me, which is if you have a guest and he was invited, even if it was a mistake, if you have a guest, the most important thing is that you actually aren't rude to a guest. So I think that, I mean, but then I thought, but maybe Bar Kamsa was someone you really, really didn't want to be seen to be associated with. So if people saw Bar Kamsa at the meal, the host's reputation would have been damaged. So that could have been another part of the story. But then I was also thinking there's also the context of historically at that time in Jerusalem, that there were the different factions. So maybe they were so I don't think it was just as simple as, okay, he didn't like him. I think there was probably other things being played out. And then I thought also on another level, one can see it as an internal something. You can't, the damage it does if you exclude somebody or something even within yourself that you don't like, if you just exclude it out of hand, that actually that exclusion instead of can do a lot of damage instead of actually trying to have some dialogue, whether it's internal or external. So those were the different thoughts that went through my head.
Okay, good. Thanks, Ruth. I mean, the only other thing I was thinking when you were talking is it doesn't have to even be dialogue. Dialogue is already a big step along the way. It could just be ignoring. But here it wasn't dialogue. It wasn't ignoring. It was full-on attack. And yes, Ruth, I take everything that you've said there. Anyone else want to say anything else before I comment? Anyone else? Okay. So it's
I would like
yes,
to.
Paulette,
sorry. Rabbi, I think the mere fact that he went afterwards to the Romans and said what he said to the Romans about the Jews, and maybe the host thought, well, if he stays, who knows what he can say? And maybe he was right, because he went and said a negative thing from him being kicked out, but maybe he would have gone and said the Jews are whatever, partying and drunkards, and said something defamatory anyway, because we don't know what Bar Kamsa had said to offend him or done to offend him, but clearly he wasn't a very nice man. No Jewish person should go and tell on Unzura, you know what I mean?
Yes, and Paulette, I was thinking about Bar Kamsa the way that you're thinking about it, and I was trying to understand a person like that, because of course he would know, being a Jewish person, that it's not in his best interest for the Romans to attack his people. He himself is going to go down. It's similar to what's going on in South Africa now, that nobody wins by Pick and Pay and Checkers being looted. You can say they've got money and whatever it is, but there's people who work for Checkers, and there's people who work for the people who work for Checkers. You don't even have to think hard to realize that it's not good for anybody. So who does that? And I was thinking, there are some people that I've met in life, and maybe even myself at certain times. I definitely think I see it in my children, at least in my son sometimes, that when he doesn't get his way, it's like the end of the world. He doesn't care what happens. It's like when children have a tantrum. They don't care what the repercussions are. They don't think anything. I didn't get what I wanted. I don't care. I just don't care about the world. I don't care about my life. I don't care about winning, losing, living, dying. So I think he was more than just a negative person. I think he must have lacked a lot of self-esteem and a lot of reason for life to get to the point that he would let everybody else come down with him, including himself. So yes, Paulette, I think that's a very good point. Last minute or two, if anyone wants to comment, and then I'm going to say a few things from modern rabbis that they say about this, and then we'll end up. Now, by the way, that video continues for another 40 minutes about the other stories that happen after the Kamsa and Bar Kamsa story. So if anyone's interested in that, please get hold of me, and or you can just look in YouTube, UCSD Kamsa, Kamza, and you'll be able to find that in YouTube. I just thought it was the most fascinating thing because I saw it live at UCSD. I couldn't believe that. I didn't see the actual event live, but I saw, you know, the screen, the video that you were watching, I saw there at UCSD. So a couple of things. Number one is Kamsa and Bar Kamsa for certainty were not their real names. Now, why did the Talmud veer off from what their names are? Actually, Kamsa, according to Jastrow, who's the main Aramaic translation on the Talmud, he assumes that Kamsa means locust. So it's almost like the story said it's Mr. Locust and Mr. Grasshopper were enemies of each other. That's literally the way that it's described. And some commentaries want to say they're using that word because they both wanted to eat each other up like a locust, like an insect. There was no human-y feeling. It was like, whatever I can eat, I'm going to eat. And that was the relationship that they had. So that's why it's Kamsa. But the reason why it's not mentioned who their names are, Mr. Cohen or Mr. Karnovitz or Mr. Newfield or whatever it was, is because these things happen all the time. That people have petty arguments in public where they're not willing to budge for 1 second. And if it had given their names, you would think that maybe that's a specific event for those people. But by the fact that it gives it anonymously, the authors or the editors of the Talmud are trying to say, don't think that in 2021 or in the years, 450 when they were editing the Talmud, that it doesn't happen. Because yes, there are people who get tantrums and there still are people who kick people out of their parties and who don't let people into their parties and who don't invite people to their parties and all this type of thing. And I know a psychologist in Eisner who's giving a whole course on how social media is damaging and how you can be healthy in social media, because there's crazy bullying and stuff going on between all different age groups online. So that stuff I think is very in tune with why the authors of the Talmud or the editors of the Talmud left it as anonymous. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two, and this is Alfonso and Ruth relating to what you both said. So I wrote it as, this is embarrassment versus exclusivity. So the host is someone, in my opinion, wanting an exclusive party. So he's got some time, and Alfonso, this is a little bit like what you were saying, I think, is that he wanted his friends and his families and the A group of his type of people. That's what he wanted. And you can't blame someone who puts in lots of money and time and energy going through guest lists. I can only have a certain amount of people. Who should I invite? This one or that one? And I can only spend a certain amount. So I have to get this designer and not that designer. And I can only do certain dates of the year because this person is overseas this time and that person's having an operation and this and that. A lot of thought goes into a party and an event. And whoever has had children who have got married and have had decently sized weddings, I mean, over 100 people, I'm sure you will know that it's almost impossible not to have a faribble about someone that you did not invite. Or more even so, you invited this person, but you didn't invite that person. You invited this cousin, this second cousin, but you didn't invite that second cousin. So yes, this stuff is very, very prevalent. And the host wanted an exclusive party because he had put so much effort into it. The Bar Kamsa, he is all of us in the sense of who wants to be kicked out of a party in front of everybody, especially when you are the rich person who's used to getting your way. Especially if you maybe think that this person invited you to the party to make up. So you had got over your hatred and your anxiety and whatever, saying, oh, you know what? I got a party from this person who, we've had 2 years of arguments and disagreements and, business dealings or misdealings, but finally he's coming around because he's inviting me to his son's bar mitzvah. So you have to think real what exactly it was. And I think that the lessons to learn on both of them is, if you're the host, what's so wrong with just saying, okay, I put in all this time and effort, but take the stum powder, I think that's a Yiddish expression, take the stum powder, which is, be quiet, let the guy sit in the corner and don't make a big stink out of it. That's a better approach. And Ruth, this is what you were saying. That's a better approach than to attack the guy where he's going to get upset and you're also going to get upset because you actually have to deal with it. So I think that is a much better way of mediation from the host perspective. From the guest perspective, you sometimes just have to come to the point that not everybody likes you. That's a hard thing for some people to realize. I think that it's almost a good meditation. And forgive me for my sacrilegious thought if you think that this is sacrilegious, but I think it's almost a good meditation to say in the morning, not everybody likes me. Not everybody likes me, not everybody will like me. There's one meditation to say, I'm love, I'm wonderful, I'm good, I'm all those things. And that's one meditation that's a good one. And I'd probably say you should do that one first. But the second meditation, which is a more real meditation, is not everybody has to love me. And not only that, not everybody will love me. And definitely not everybody will love me like my mommy loves me. And when it comes to the situation where, you're in a position where someone doesn't want you there, just use enough seichel to realize that they are also entitled to their freedom as much as you are. And that's also something to navigate out of that in your own brain, to be able to get over that embarrassment, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to get over that embarrassment. What's interesting is that the Talmud doesn't blame the story on either the host or Bar Kamsa. Unbelievable. It says, the Talmud says it was the meekness of that rabbi who didn't do anything about the sacrifice with the blemish that enraged the Caesar, and that caused the war. And there's different opinions about this. Some opinions view this as not a criticism. It's just saying, because of his humility, like Rabbi Gilbert, one of my colleagues, wonderful guy, I think he's retired. I remember he once said that no one saw him the month before Rosh Hashanah because he was reading the whole Harry Potter series. That's what he said on the Yom Kippur drosha. He said, for 1 month, I just read all the Harry Potter droshas. I was so into it, and that was my preparation for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So that Rabbi Gilbert was saying that the rabbi was saying he was humble. He wasn't arrogant to think he could change the law, and the Talmud's just giving it as a matter of fact, it wasn't his fault. But most opinions say it was his fault. And even the professors on the video were saying that because of his inability to make a decision at critical times, that brought out a war. And what I think about that is, number one, if you want to be an enlightened individual, which these rabbis were meant to be, and I'm sure they were, of course they were in many ways, but in one way they weren't, which was how to act in a situation where you naturally are going to be frozen. And we all have those moments where, I don't know, God forbid you're in a car crash or someone's in a car crash and you come and see the person, it's your fault, and you don't know what to say. And you don't know what to get out your mouth because you're frozen in that moment. Or, you get into a business meeting and something that you missed out something very, very important in the business meeting, and all your potential investors realize that you've messed up completely. What do you do at that particular moment when it's frozen? That's where one's experience of the world and one's enlightenment should pull through. And if you haven't really been tested in those moments, it shows that you haven't really gone out your comfort zone. And that's what part of becoming transformed as a human being involves. So that's one thing that I learned from that. Another thing is that what was Rabbi, I forget his name now, it's not in front of me, but that rabbi who didn't do anything. What was his problem of, bending the law? Was he saying we're breaking a rabbinic law and we can't even break a rabbinic law? Of course you should break rabbinic laws. Of course, if it's going to save the Jewish people. Of course. Esther married King Ahasuerus to save the Jewish people, and you can imagine that wasn't exactly God's intention for her either. So yes, of course you should bend the law to save a nation. If it was the Torah law, which is the mostly assumed that they're talking about the sacrifice in terms of Torah law, even that, the Talmud seems to be suggesting that there are certain times that you need to see big picture. You're not going to have a Talmud, you're not going to have a temple, you're not going to have any sacrifices if you let this sacrifice happen. And I see it today all over the world, with every religion in the world, including Judaism, including Orthodox Judaism, including everything, every tradition out there. Teachers, unfortunately, and I'm not excluding myself either because I'm a product of my society as well, but unfortunately we've got to the habit of seeing the minutiae from a very small position, and it's the younger generations through the internet and through technology who are seeing big picture. I mean, we talk about big picture. Richard Branson this week is the first non-astronaut who's seen the world big picture from space. Our great-grandchildren and grandchildren, instead of going to Plettenberg Bay and Mauritius for December, they're going to be going into the stratosphere. They're going to be seeing big picture of the world. And I'm hoping that all leaders of the world, all politicians, all rabbis, imams, priests, whatever, somehow understand that the nitty-gritties sometimes are not as important as big picture, because you don't have a future if you always focus on the nitty-gritties. So that is another thing. I think in Yiddish you say, don't be a verkrampter, okay? Don't always be a verkrampter. I don't exactly know how to translate that, but I think it means don't be like stuck up all the time. Be a little bit more open in those particular situations. And lastly, just to end off, it's hard to know what to do in the situation. It's hard to know to blame the rabbis, to blame this particular rabbi, to blame Bar Kamsa, to blame the host. Sometimes things just happen. And I think the bigger picture is also to know when all these things happen, how do you deal with it on a grand level? And that's the way that the rabbis of the Talmud wanted to take out of this. They didn't want to place all the blame on the rabbis. They didn't want to place the blames on the hosts and the Bar Kamsa. They just told the story. And it's for us to draw out what we think the world needs from those stories so that they never, ever happen again. And I don't know how good the Jewish world is doing with that and the world in general. We do see that there's a lot of, politics and ugliness and fighting and criticism and finger pointing and all this type of stuff. And to conclude, they call that sinat chinam, which means causeless hatred. Now, I don't love that word causeless hatred, even though that's the exact expression, because you can always justify the hatred. It's very difficult to say that, the host was completely wrong. He had sinat chinam because he was absolutely uncalled for. No, he had a big party and he didn't want someone there who wasn't invited. You can fully understand it. And you can fully understand Bar Kamsa's side. And you can fully understand the rabbi side as well, that there's laws in the Torah, they don't want to veer from it and they don't know how to veer from it on the spot. So it's very hard to point the picture. But when you take yourself out of the picture, we're now in 2021, looking at a document from the 5th century. We have to draw out what it is that will benefit us, just like those kids in San Diego, try to make it real how they would react in those situations. And Rabbi Kook, as well as probably other rabbis, but Rabbi Kook was one of the rabbis who said, the only way to fight Sinat Chinam is to create Ahavat Chinam, which means causeless love. And again, I don't like the expression because causeless love gives the impression that you love someone when they're not really deserving, or there's no reason to love, but you love them. But I think what Rabbi Kook really meant when he said it is, yes, there is always a reason to love. There is always, you don't need the reason because it's so obvious. It should be so obvious that we're all in this world together. And if Corona didn't tell us that the particles on this planet are in all of our lungs, and no matter how hard we try to isolate our borders and our policies and whatever else it is, the air will kill us collectively. And that is what I think Corona has shown the world the most. And just like those forces of devastation are in the air, so are the forces of redemption and the forces of real reality, which is we are all in this together for better or for worse. And I think that's the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. That's why the rabbis left it anonymous, that it will be applied in our day in 2021. I will discuss on Friday a little bit more the laws of Tisha B'Av, but I hope everybody thought interesting today of discussing a text with a multimedia presentation, cross-referencing with another culture, which is American students in 2008, and lastly with us here in Musenberg. So I think everybody's got a little bit to think about. Thanks everyone, stay healthy and well, and see you on Friday, hopefully. God bless.